The Toronto Analytics Party brings you the following report. Using analytics to find the best places to buy rental property in Ontario. We comb through thousands of real estate listings and thousands of rental units to find optimal areas for potential purchase. What are we looking for here? We're looking for arbitrage. And by arbitrage, we mean that the rental income of the unit is greater than the cost of the mortgage for the same unit. We're looking for risk-free profit. How do we do it? Well, we mix real estate listings with rental listings. We create paired examples, and I'll show you some of those soon. And we are looking for really cities with great returns and what are the best places in those top cities. There's a few exceptions, but I'll show you both. Now, how do you define a good candidate? Well, there's a lot of different metrics I can show you. But ultimately, as mentioned, we want the rental revenue greater than the mortgage, and I want to know if that is true, how does that rank with all the other units that might be up at the market at the same time? Now, the objective is to highlight good leads or candidates for in-person evaluation. So, just to highlight potential investor, maybe 5 or 10 units that you want to take a look at and evaluate. Finding great candidates is like finding a needle in a haystack. For every 1,000 real estate listings, only 10% have rental data associated with them at any one given time. Only 1.4% of that 1,000 show potential income for rent greater than the mortgage. And when you dig deeper on that 1.4%, it turns out that only 1 in 350 real estate listings are candidates for in-person evaluation. It's very difficult to do even with analytics. It seems to me almost impossible without. Now, what is a paired example? I'll show you. I really want to get the data down to a point when I'm looking at the real estate listing and the rental, we know that we can be confident that we've got some really great data quality to evaluate. So here's the example. So you look at a little neighborhood up here in Windsor, let's highlight it a bit, and I'm going to show you a postal code because I want both the rental unit and the house listing to be in the same postal code and as close to each other as possible, and here it is. So on the left, we have 493 Karen at $139,000, and we have for rent 477 Karen at $1,400 a month. So what happens here is we have an annual mortgage cost of $7,600, and we get an annual rent of $16,800, and we get over $9,000 in cash flow per year. Pretty good. Now, so let's take a look at some of the different cities here. You can see that there's not a tremendous amount of variation. But first, what I'm looking for is the proportion of monthly payment that can be covered by the rental income. Obviously, ideally, we'd like to have it over 100%, but those are very, very rare cases. So when we average them all out of what generally is going on, we can see that Kitchener, from a math perspective, looks like it's a good candidate for further evaluation. So does Mississauga. So does London. It certainly, on the paper, looking a little bit better than places like Toronto, Richmond Hill, Ottawa, Embrun, which is really kind of a rural village south of Ottawa, Waterloo, and certainly Niagara Lake way down at the bottom. Not to say that there isn't candidates within these areas that would be really, really good, but just on average, if we started to begin our analysis and discovery, we're going to start to look at the ones on the top. Makes sense. So we think about house valuation. At the same time, we'll think about rental. There's another element to this in this. How is that market appreciating in value year over year for that unit? And how do we think of both of the rental returns and unit appreciation at the same time? It does get a little bit gets a bit complicated, but certainly very, very important to know. I'm going to give you just one example of a mortgage at $250,000, which gets you a monthly payment of just over $1,000, just incidentally amazing. And I wanted to run through different scenarios, whether the house declined in value, appreciated slightly, or appreciated a lot. And let's start with the doomsday scenario where we're in a market bubble, and over 5 years we get minus 5% valuation year over year over year for those 5 years. So actually, clearly very bad situation. So even though on paper we've identified a really interesting arbitrage moment, doesn't mean that you couldn't get a real shock to the system and things go poorly. So in that particular case, you are, and I'll, by the way, add in the taxes, of course. Each municipality is going to have a little bit of a different tax rate, so I don't factor in all the calculations, but clearly it's in there. Clearly in there for final evaluation, at any rate. And I'm going to put that at $5,000 for a unit at $250,000. tax per year. So what ends up happening is you're going to be out $563 per month if we get to the doomsday scenario. So who are we kidding? That's not a good situation at all. But could be worse. So let's look at different scenarios where if the market just stays level, doesn't change, doesn't do anything, you're getting $7,500 a year in income because we're getting the person paying off your mortgage and the difference between your basically the value of the home and your equity. So then we look at situations where we get 2 to 4% increases a year, and even upwards of 8 or 10%. And what happens in the 6 to 8 to 10%, if the unit is going up that much per year, you're really coming in between $20,000 and $30,000 per year in increased value. So let's take a look at the top candidates, mathematically speaking, mind you. This one, just as an individual little area, is actually north of Sudbury. What up? And it's right up here, a place called, I think, Caprio. So that's about an hour outside of Sudbury. And again, this is just the math. Let's just take a look and see what it is. And on the left, we see we have a unit for sale. And on the right, just stone's throw away, we have one for rent. The house cost here on our left is $120,000. And the rental income over here is listed at $1,500. Now the person looks like they've broken into 2 units to rent out the same house. Now the monthly mortgage here is at $549, meaning that if you could get $1,500 from this unit, it's going to cover 179% of the cost of your mortgage. Another example in the same little town. And this is really fun because these are beside each other, which makes these paired examples so powerful. The house cost here on our right is $165,000, and the rent is at $1,200. So your monthly mortgage is $755, and you have a $1,200 rental income, which means you have the rental income covering 159% of the mortgage cost. If only we could see that in downtown Toronto. So here's an example of Mississauga, something a little closer to the Toronto core. If you're not too familiar with Mississauga, this is you might want to just think of it as a giant bedroom community for Toronto. And the downtown, the functional downtown core for Mississauga is Square One Shopping Center. Lots of condos going in around here and lots of new transit development taking place. And I'll show you some examples in here. So let's take a look at 470 Confederation Parkway, Mississauga. This is units in here are going for $250, and they're being rented out at $1,500. So we have a monthly mortgage fee of $1,145, but you have condo fees, of course, at $372, which means your rental covers 99% of your mortgage. So very, very good. Very, very exciting opportunity to get into Mississauga. Another example, Mississauga, here at 220 Burnhamthorpe. The house cost, very close to the other one, incidentally. The house cost the unit cost is $270,000 to buy a condo in here, starting. And we're seeing lots of rental properties in there at $1,850. So even with the monthly fees of $432, we have the rent covering 111% of the cost. Now, when we think about areas in Toronto, I'm going to show you 2 areas just to see how things play out. Same area here, Square One. And then I'm going to show you a place up here in Park Lawn and Lakeshore. And they're quite different in that this is, again, really in Mississauga, you got a lot of light industrial jobs up here. So easier for commuting if you happen to work in Mississauga. And this is a big, big retail profile going on here. Now over here, there's not a lot of retail profile, and it's actually, even though looks like it's into Toronto, it's really Etobicoke. And it's, so I said, very limited retail profile going on here, and not the easiest commute either, although it might look like it would be, but it's actually kind of difficult to get in downtown to Toronto and certainly often to Mississauga. But it's right by the water, beautiful place, and you have a real active lifestyle of people living down there. So very interesting. And if we compare the condo costs over here, you can start getting in at $250. Over in this area, you better get ready to pay $450. So we see a big, big difference. But if you look at the rental difference is. Almost the same. In fact, the ones listed at the time of this report, you're seeing actually the ones over here going for a higher amount at $1,800 for rental unit over here in Mississauga versus $1,600 over here. So you're seeing this wild difference, which is why when we think of rental investing, we really want to go for the area that covers as much of the cost of the mortgage as possible. We just want to de-risk it, and we're not seeing those opportunities at the time of this report up here in Park Lawn and Lakeshore. Another example over in Kitchener, where we see 85 Duke Street, which is right by the GO station, 7-minute walk. Not bad, and there's some condos going in. We see the unit cost over here at $243, with which we bring a mortgage of $1,100, but the monthly rental income is at $1,300. So even with the monthly fees, you're covering 98% of your mortgage costs. Another example is off in Kingston, where we have 57 Hamilton, which is right over here. And our paired example is 13 Hamilton for sale, which is right over here. And we see the house cost at $219,000, which is a monthly mortgage of $1,000. The monthly rental income over here is at $1,200, which means your rent is covering 125% of your mortgage. One more example here in Kingston, 3 units for sale. See one for $250,000, which have a monthly mortgage of $1,145. The monthly rental income is at $1,475. So your rent income is covering 123% of the cost. Let's go over to London. Again, another area that looked pretty exciting and pretty interesting. We see a house cost here at, this is a brand new development. As you can see, model home still plastered on that thing, at $390,000, which is a monthly mortgage of almost $1,800. The rental income for the units listed here is at $2,400 a month. Even with the monthly fees, we see this at covering the rental income covering 118%. Another example is in Hamilton. Now, Hamilton, at a high level is not looking very appealing. It doesn't look like there's a lot of units that are interesting, but I'm going to show you one that's very, very interesting. Now, we look at 112 Birch, which is right here. And our paired example is 132 Birch for rent. So pretty good, pretty close, like it. And the house cost here is $190,000, but the rental for this unit here is coming in at $1,575. So you have a very small mortgage at $870, and the rental is covering 181% of it. So very, very interesting there. Interesting opportunity for further evaluation. So this report is all about reaching out to the people looking to invest in rental properties and have a discussion about how we can help and get something really exciting going. So please reach out.